The night was cold and silent in Rome, with a sharp wind cutting through the empty streets and slipping between ancient stone buildings. Enzo Castellani, an elderly man with a solemn, steely expression, adjusted his thick coat as he walked slowly through the winding alleyways. His steps were heavy, laden with both his years and the grief he carried since the family tragedy that had changed his life. He moved in silence, as he always did, keeping his head low and avoiding eye contact with anyone he passed, locked into a lonely routine that played out night after night. In a nearly empty square, he noticed a small figure curled up on a stone bench. The boy was shivering, poorly dressed for the season in an old, worn-out coat, visibly dirty and huddled against the biting cold. Moved by a rare and unexplainable compassion, Enzo approached cautiously. His eyes, tired and weathered, lingered on the boy for a moment before he spoke, breaking the silence in a hoarse but gentle tone. "Hey boy, are you hungry?" At first, the boy didn't respond, only burying his head deeper into his arms, knees drawn tightly to his chest as if he wanted to disappear entirely. Enzo, persistent, knelt down beside him and extended a loaf of bread he had bought earlier. "Take it," he said softly. "It's all right." His voice, usually distant, had taken on a rare kindness. Finally, the boy looked up, and in that instant, Enzo's heart nearly stopped. The boy's eyes were wide and fearful, but the face, so familiar, hauntingly so, left Enzo in shock. Before him was Luca, his grandson, presumed dead in a tragic accident 5 years ago. Luca, the name escaped his lips, barely audible, as though even saying it might break the fragile moment. Luca looked confused, his brow furrowed as he glanced at Enzo without recognition. Yet something in Enzo's voice and presence struck him as faintly familiar. A surge of emotions ran through Enzo: joy, disbelief, fear. He had been there when they buried the bodies, had mourned his son, his daughter-in-law, and Luca. "Is it really you, Luca?" Enzo's voice trembled, his grip tightening on the boy's frail shoulders. "How are you here? What happened?" Luca looked away, as if his very identity caused him pain. He bit his lip, his expression caught between sorrow and fear. I don't remember." His voice was low and fragile, as though even speaking took effort. "All I know is I'm here." Enzo's mind raced. How was it possible? The boy he had grieved for was alive, somehow surviving all these years on the streets of Rome. "You're safe now, Luca," he said, struggling to keep his own emotions in check. "I'll take care of you. Nothing bad will happen, I promise. Let's go home." Luca hesitated, torn between trusting this stranger and clinging to the survival instincts he'd developed on the streets. But hunger and exhaustion won out, and after a pause, he nodded slightly. "All right," he whispered. Enzo gently wrapped an arm around Luca's shoulders and helped him to his feet. The boy was thin and frail, like he might shatter at any moment. As they walked down the deserted street, Enzo's heart churned with turmoil. How could this boy be Luca, and what had happened during those missing years? When they reached the Castellani mansion, a grand and imposing building that once overflowed with warmth and life, it felt emptier than ever, the silence mirroring the hollowness in Enzo's chest. As they stepped through the large wooden door, which creaked softly in the stillness, the vast hall opened up before them, dimly illuminated by chandeliers that now seemed dulled by time. Luca hesitated at the threshold, as though the grandiose surroundings were foreign to him. His eyes moved slowly around the room, searching for any trace of familiarity. Enzo, noticing the boy's discomfort, placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "This is your home now, Luca," he said, forcing a smile while trying to contain the storm of emotions within. "Everything's going to be all right." Yet, deep down, Enzo was anything but calm. The shock of Luca's return had raised so many questions. How had his grandson survived an accident the authorities claimed left no survivors, and why had no one ever found him? Each time he looked at Luca, guilt surfaced anew. He had accepted the police's conclusions, too overwhelmed to demand more answers. And now, seeing Luca alive and vulnerable, all the grief he had buried rose to the surface. "Do you remember this place?" Enzo asked gently, watching Luca's eyes as they roamed the room. Luca's gaze drifted uncertainly around the hall. He took a few hesitant steps, his hand brushing a marble table as though trying to remember a distant, fading memory. "I think I've been here before," he murmured, his voice faint. "But it feels like a long time ago." Enzo's chest tightened at those words. Watching Luca, now distant and adrift in fragmented memories, he felt a pang of sorrow. The boy who had once run joyfully through these very halls seemed like a ghost, lost and searching for pieces of himself in the emptiness. The mansion's halls, once filled with the laughter of a young Luca playing with his parents, now felt haunted, echoing only the shadow of the boy he used to be. Though Enzo told himself to be patient, his need to understand what had happened grew with each passing moment. "Come, I'll take you to your room," Enzo said, guiding Luca up the grand staircase lined with rich carpets. Each step they took resounded in the stillness, filling the air with a tension both of them could feel. Luca's eyes wandered over the mansion's details as if trying to grasp a memory slipping just out of reach. They reached the second floor, where Enzo opened a door and gestured for Luca to enter. The room seemed untouched, preserved as it had been years ago. The walls were a gentle blue, and a large, inviting bed took up the center of the space. Toys were arranged carefully on a shelf in the corner, as if time itself had waited for Luca's return. He moved to the bed, running his hand over the soft bedspread, his face a mixture of confusion, as though piecing together a puzzle he didn't yet understand. "I used to sleep here, didn't I?" Luca asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Yes," Enzo replied, his own voice wavering. "This was always your room, Luca, and now it's yours again. You can rest here. You're home." Luca nodded, though his face remained tight with uncertainty. He sat on the edge of the bed, his thin, dirty hands resting tensely in his lap. Though he was safe now, Enzo could tell his wounds ran deeper than mere hunger or cold. You must be hungry," Enzo said, trying to sound upbeat despite the heaviness he felt. "I'll have them bring something for you to eat. You don't have to worry about anything here." Luca nodded absently, his gaze distant, tangled in thoughts he couldn't yet unravel. Enzo stepped out briefly to the kitchen to arrange a meal. When he returned with a simple tray, he found Luca in the same spot, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Here, Luca, you need to eat," Enzo said, setting the tray on a small table beside the bed. Luca took the fork, hesitating before he started to eat slowly, as though each bite might unlock a piece of the past. But suspicion still lingered in his eyes. Sitting in a nearby chair, Enzo watched him in silence, hoping to catch a clue in the boy's expression, some hint of what he'd been through. Finally, breaking the stillness between them, Enzo asked the question he feared most. "Luca, do you remember anything about the accident? About your parents?" Luca's fork stilled midair. He lowered his head, and a frustrated sigh escaped him. I don't remember. I just remember being lost," he murmured, his voice tinged with sadness and confusion. "I don't know what happened." The tightness in Enzo's chest returned. He could hardly bear the pain and confusion in Luca's eyes, yet relief washed over him with the knowledge his grandson was alive, a hope rekindled he'd thought he had lost forever. "It's all right, my boy," Enzo said softly, doing his best to keep his own emotions in check. "You're safe now. We'll find out what happened together." The next morning, soft sunlight filtered through the heavy curtains of Luca's room, casting a golden glow over everything. Enzo entered quietly and stood watching Luca's sleeping form. Although his expression was peaceful, his body seemed tense, as if his dreams couldn't shield him from whatever haunted him. "Luca," Enzo called gently as he approached the bed. "It's time to get up, my boy." Luca opened his eyes, blinking in confusion as he looked at Enzo, then around the room, struggling to remember where he was. But soon he recognized the Castellani mansion, and his gaze returned to Enzo, searching for answers his mind couldn't yet find. "Did you sleep well?" Enzo asked, sitting beside him. Luca nodded slowly, though his expression told a different story. He was present, but his mind seemed distant, as if caught in a fog he couldn't clear. "Maybe breakfast will help you feel better," Enzo offered, hoping to ease the tension. "Then we can talk a little if you'd like." Enzo led Luca to the dining room, where a simple yet plentiful spread of bread, fruit, and juices awaited. Luca sat down cautiously, eyeing the food with hesitancy, as though unsure if it was truly safe. His time on the streets had taught him not to take anything for granted, not even a meal. "Eat whatever you want. There's nothing to fear here," Enzo assured him, trying to make his tone warm and calm. Luca picked up a piece of bread, taking a small, tentative bite. Enzo observed him closely, searching for any sign of familiarity, any reaction that might help bridge the distance between them. The silence between them felt heavy, yet Enzo knew that pushing too hard would only backfire. Luca needed time, and Enzo was willing to wait as long as it took. "I remember something," Luca said, breaking the silence. Enzo leaned forward, his heart racing. "What is it?" he asked, struggling to keep his desperation hidden. Luca placed the bread back on his plate, looking down at his hands, clearly disturbed by the images flickering to life in his mind. "I remember being with my parents," he whispered, his voice hesitant. "But it's all blurry. We were in the car, I think, and then there was a loud sound, a bright light, and nothing." A chill ran down Enzo's spine. That vague description matched the accident reports he had pored over, trying to understand how such a terrible event could happen. Now, hearing Luca's fragmented memories, it brought back all his unanswered questions. "You don't have to remember it all at once, Luca," Enzo said, placing a comforting hand on the boy's shoulder. "Take your time, we're in this together." Luca nodded, though his face betrayed the turmoil inside. He was on the edge of understanding, yet he seemed afraid of what he might discover if he delved deeper into his memories. After breakfast, Enzo suggested they go to the mansion's basement, where he had stored boxes of family memorabilia. Maybe some photos or familiar objects would help Luca reconnect with his past. They walked down together, anticipation filling the silence between them. The boxes lay stacked in the corner, covered with a fine layer of dust, as though time itself had forgotten this place. Enzo opened one of the boxes and began pulling out old photo albums, toys from Luca's childhood, and personal items that had belonged to Luca's parents. "Do you remember these toys?" Enzo asked, holding up a small wooden car that had once been Luca's favorite. Luca stared at the car for a long moment, and something shifted in his eyes. A spark of recognition crossed Luca's face, shadowed by a deep sadness. "I vaguely remember," he murmured, brushing the car with the tips of his fingers. "I used to play with this, didn't I?" "Yes, you did. You'd spend hours down here in the basement with your toys, making up stories and racing them around." Enzo tried to smile, but his voice betrayed the ache in his heart. Luca continued sifting through the box, pulling out an old photo album. Its pages, faded with time, still held glimpses of joy-filled moments. There were photos of him as a baby, laughing in his mother Alexandra's arms, and of his father Domenico grinning warmly beside him. Luca turned the pages in silence, his eyes tracing each image as if trying to connect with a life that now felt like a distant memory. "They were happy," Luca murmured, a tear slipping down his cheek. Why did everything have to change? Enzo had no answer. He'd asked himself that same question every day since the accident. There was no logic behind the cruel twist that had taken Domenico and Alexandra and left Luca alone in the world. "I'd give anything to change what happened, Luca," Enzo said, his voice thick with emotion. "But now we have to move forward. We'll find out what really happened, and more than that, we'll rebuild what's left." Days passed, and the rhythm of life at the Castellani mansion began to stabilize, though peace remained elusive. Luca kept his distance, and the fragments of his memory only deepened the sense that something darker lay beneath it all. Meanwhile, Enzo grew increasingly restless. He could no longer just wait for Luca's memories to return. He needed answers and decided to call for professional help. Salvatore, an old friend and trusted family detective, arrived at the mansion. His strong, steady presence was both reassuring and unsettling. Enzo knew Salvatore would leave no stone unturned. "Enzo, it's good to see you," Salvatore greeted him with a firm handshake. "I've heard there's been quite an unexpected turn of events." "Yes, Salvatore." Enzo sighed, feeling the weight of the situation more acutely. "Luca is alive, but he doesn't remember anything about the accident or how he survived. I need your help to find out what truly happened. The police closed the case as an accident, but something doesn't sit right." Salvatore nodded, determination flashing in his eyes. He'd never accepted easy answers, and his instincts told him there was more to this story. "I'll start right away," he said, pulling out a notebook and adjusting his coat. "Give me everything you have, and I'll re-examine the crash site. I'll also speak with people who may have been overlooked in the initial investigation." As Salvatore delved into the investigation, Enzo's anxiety mounted. He knew the detective's reputation for thoroughness, but he feared what the search might reveal. Tensions grew with each passing day. Luca seemed more restless too, as though he were drawing closer to a truth he wasn't yet ready to face. After a week of exhaustive work, Salvatore returned with a grave expression. He asked Enzo to sit, preparing him for what was to come. "Enzo, what I've uncovered won't be easy to hear," Salvatore began, his voice steady yet compassionate. "I reviewed all the accident documents and spoke with eyewitnesses who were never officially questioned. What I found suggests that the accident wasn't what it appeared to be." Enzo felt his stomach churn. He'd suspected something was wrong, but hearing it spoken aloud made his whole body tremble. "What do you mean?" Enzo asked, his voice barely audible. Salvatore opened a folder of documents he had brought with him, spreading photos and reports across the table in front of them. "These are the tire marks from the accident scene. They don't just match Domenico's car. There are signs of another vehicle at the scene. A car that, according to the evidence, pushed Domenico's car off the road." Enzo's eyes widened. The idea that the accident might have been caused by someone else was more than he could bear. "So you're saying that someone attacked them? That it was premeditated?" Enzo tried to stay calm, but anger and desperation were beginning to take over. "That's what all the evidence points to," Salvatore confirmed. "But there's more. I went to the hospital where Alexandra was taken. I spoke with a nurse who was on duty that night. She remembers something that wasn't included in the official report. Alexandra, before she went into a coma, tried to say something. She was visibly agitated, as if she wanted to warn someone about something, but they couldn't understand what it was." Enzo was speechless. What had Alexandra known, and why had she tried to warn someone just before losing consciousness? He clenched his fists, feeling anger grow in his chest. For all these years, he had trusted the police's conclusions, believing it had been a tragic accident. Now, everything he thought he knew was falling apart. "What about Luca?" Enzo asked, his voice filled with anguish. "What did you find out about how he survived?" Salvatore paused, choosing his words carefully. "That's the biggest mystery. Luca was presumed dead along with his parents, but the body they claimed was Luca's was never officially identified. They assumed it was him due to the extent of the damage in the accident. But now with Luca alive, it's clear there was a mistake. The problem is, back then, no one asked questions. Everyone accepted the official version." Enzo felt a wave of crushing guilt. He had accepted that version. He hadn't questioned it or asked for more detailed answers. But now, with Luca back, he couldn't ignore the doubts any longer. He needed to find out who had caused the accident and, more importantly, why Luca had been on the streets all these years, without memory, without family. "Salvatore, what do we do now?" Enzo asked, determination renewing his voice. "How do we find out what really happened?" "We have to dig deeper, Enzo," Salvatore replied. "I believe Alexandra knew something dangerous, that's connected to what happened that night. We need to find out what she knew and why Domenico and Luca were involved. For that, I'll need to investigate the circle around Domenico. It's likely he was involved in something bigger than we imagined." Enzo watched Luca on the other side of the room. The boy was sitting near the window, staring at the horizon, his thoughts lost in a faraway place. Salvatore had returned to the investigation, promising to delve deeper into Domenico and Alexandra's past. But what he had revealed so far was already enough to shake the reality Enzo believed he knew. The idea that the accident wasn't just an accident and that Alexandra had tried to warn someone was something he couldn't shake from his mind. What had she known, and why would Domenico, the most honest man he had ever known, be involved in something so dangerous? "Grandpa." Luca's soft voice interrupted Enzo's thoughts. He turned to the boy, whose eyes now seemed darker and filled with doubt. "Yes, Luca," he replied, moving closer to his grandson. "I've been dreaming about the accident," Luca began, his voice trembling, "but I don't know if they're memories or if my mind is just making things up." Enzo felt his heart tighten. He knew Luca was trying to remember, and any detail could be crucial. "What have you been dreaming about?" Enzo asked, sitting beside the boy and holding his hand to offer comfort. Luca took a deep breath before starting. "It always starts in the car. We're driving down a road. My parents are talking. I can't hear what they're saying, but it seems like something is worrying them." He closed his eyes, trying to focus. "Then suddenly, there's a turn, and I remember the sound of the tires screeching, my mom screaming, and then everything goes quiet." The silence between them was sharp. Luca kept his eyes closed, struggling to gather more details, but the darkness that followed in his mind seemed impenetrable. "I know there's more, something I'm forgetting, but I just can't remember," Luca said, frustrated, rubbing his face with his hands. Enzo squeezed the boy's hand tighter, trying to hide his own frustration. He knew he couldn't force Luca to remember, but each small detail seemed to bring the puzzle pieces together. The problem was that the pieces were still scattered, and he feared that when they finally put it all together, the truth might be more painful than any of them were prepared to face. "You're doing great, Luca," Enzo said, trying to reassure him. "You don't have to push yourself. When you're ready, more memories will come. In the meantime, I'm here with you. We won't face this alone." Luca nodded, the emotional exhaustion evident on his face. He stood up and began to move around the room, his fingers trailing over the old furniture, as if the familiar textures helped ground him in reality. "Do you think my father was involved in something dangerous?" Luca asked suddenly, his voice heavy with the weight of his question. Enzo swallowed hard. This was the question he dreaded most. Everything Salvatore had uncovered pointed to something significant, something Domenico had been entangled in, but the thought that his son could be part of something criminal was almost too much to bear. "I don't know, Luca," Enzo replied honestly. "But if he was, there must have been a good reason. Your father was a man of integrity and strong morals. Perhaps he was deceived or coerced, but I believe he acted with the intent to protect you and your mother." Luca halted his pacing and locked eyes with Enzo. His gaze was filled with uncertainty and pain, but also a growing determination. "I want to know the truth, Grandpa. I need to understand what happened to my parents and why I'm here, without any memories, with nothing. I can't keep living like this." Enzo stepped closer to Luca and placed his hands on the boy's shoulders. "We will find the truth, Luca. I promise you, no matter what we uncover, we will face it together. But we need to be patient. Sometimes answers don't come as quickly as we'd like." Luca nodded again, but the weight of uncertainty still loomed over them. As Enzo tried to comfort him, he felt the urgency of their situation. Time was slipping away. They were inching closer to a monumental truth that could alter everything. The following day, Salvatore returned to the mansion, bringing new information. This time, he appeared more concerned than during previous visits. "Enzo, I have something important to share," he said as he entered the living room. "I've been digging deeper into Domenico's connections and uncovered something you may not have known." Enzo's expression grew serious. He understood that each new revelation complicated matters further. "Tell me, I'm ready to hear it." Salvatore leaned in, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. Domenico was involved in negotiations with an influential group. He believed he was working on a significant financial project, but in truth, he was being manipulated. When he discovered their real objectives, he attempted to withdraw, but that wasn't an option. A wave of dread washed over Enzo. The son he knew would never willingly engage in something so perilous. The thought that Domenico had been ensnared in a trap filled him with both anger and despair. "They threatened him, didn't they?" he asked, already suspecting the answer. "Yes, and not just him. Alessandra knew something too. I believe that's why she tried to warn someone before slipping into a coma. She sensed the danger." The next morning cast a heavy shadow over the Castellani mansion. The air felt dense, and the walls that once represented safety now felt stifling to Enzo. Salvatore's revelations echoed in his mind like distant thunder, constant and disquieting. He understood that as painful as the truth might be, they had to press on. Luca remained withdrawn, yet something in his posture had shifted. The realization that his father, Domenico, might have been involved in something dangerous unsettled him, but it also fueled his determination to learn more. The silence between him and Enzo during breakfast was thick with unasked questions. After finishing their meal in silence, Luca stood up and, without a word, walked toward the hallway leading to Enzo's study. The old man recognized that Luca sought answers, and he desired them as well. Resolute not to waste any more time, Enzo followed his grandson. "Grandpa, what do we do now?" Luca asked, his voice low but resolute. "If my father was threatened and my mother knew something, we must uncover everything. We can't stop now." Enzo nodded, his expression serious. "Salvatore is working on it, but we can assist as well," he replied as he approached the desk in the study. "There are aspects of Domenico and Alessandra's past I never wanted to revisit, but perhaps it's time." With those words, Enzo unlocked a drawer and retrieved an old wooden box. Inside lay documents, letters, and family photos that had been stored away for ages. It was a piece of the past he had kept hidden, afraid to confront the pain, but now he knew he had to unveil these secrets. "Here are some of your father's letters," Enzo said, handing Luca a collection of yellowed papers. "Maybe we'll find a clue about what was happening." Luca accepted the letters with trembling hands, as if he were grasping fragments of a lost life. He barely remembered. As he began to read in silence, his eyes scanned each line, searching for any sign of danger. Meanwhile, Enzo sifted through other documents, trying to find something that connected with the information Salvatore had uncovered. After several long minutes, Luca's gaze fell on a particular letter. "Grandpa, I think I found something," he said, holding the letter up for Enzo to see. The handwritten note appeared to be from someone Enzo didn't immediately recognize, but the content was clear. Domenico had been involved in a series of financial transactions with a group whose intentions were obscured, hinting at shady dealings. The language was vague, yet it sent a chill down Enzo's spine. "Domenico was trying to get out," Enzo murmured, reading the final lines of the letter. "He wanted to protect you, but he was afraid he wouldn't be able to. Alessandra knew. That's why she tried to warn someone in the hospital. She was aware they were being followed." Luca fell silent, absorbing the words. A mixture of relief and sadness washed over him. His father wasn't the criminal he had feared, but rather a man trapped in something much larger, desperately trying to protect his family. He didn't know who he was dealing with. Luca said softly, almost as if speaking to himself. He thought he was helping, but by the time he realized the danger, it was too late. Enzo placed a reassuring hand on Luca's shoulder. Your father was a good man, Luca. He would have done anything to protect you. Now it's up to us to find out exactly who he was involved with and what really happened that night. Just then, the doorbell echoed through the mansion. Enzo and Luca exchanged glances. They weren't expecting anyone. Enzo slowly rose and walked to the door. Upon opening it, he found Salvatore standing there, his expression more serious than ever. Enzo, Luca, Salvatore began, hesitating. I've discovered something new, but you need to be prepared. What I'm about to tell you will change everything. Enzo invited Salvatore inside, and the detective wasted no time getting to the point. I dug deeper into the group Domenico was involved with. It's not just a financial scheme, Salvatore said, his voice grave. It's a criminal organization with deep connections across various sectors, including politics and industry. When Domenico realized what was truly happening, he tried to leave, but they wouldn't allow it. That's why the accident happened. It was all planned. Enzo felt the ground beneath him shift. The realization that the accident had been orchestrated to silence Domenico was devastating. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. They killed him, Enzo whispered. And Alessandra, she knew, didn't she? Yes, Salvatore confirmed. She found out what was happening, which is likely why she tried to escape. She knew they were in danger, but they couldn't get away in time. Luca, who had been silent until now, suddenly stood up. They killed my parents, he shouted, his voice thick with rage and pain. I spent years on the streets not knowing anything. Why didn't anyone do something? Why didn't anyone come looking for me? Salvatore sighed, his expression reflecting the weight of unanswered questions. They're powerful, Luca. The accident was covered up, and no one questioned the official story until now. Feeling the intensity of his grandson's anger and sorrow, Enzo tried to reassure him. We will get justice, Luca. I promise we won't let this end like this. Luca looked up at his grandfather, tears glistening in his eyes. I want justice, Grandpa. I want them to pay for what they did. And they will, Enzo said firmly, his own anger bubbling to the surface. We're going to take down this organization, even if it's the last thing I do. In the days that followed Salvatore's revelation, a tense atmosphere settled over the Castellani mansion. Once a refuge of peace, it now felt engulfed in shadows and unseen dangers. Enzo, Luca, and Salvatore spent hours strategizing, discussing the best ways to confront the powerful criminal organization responsible for Domenico and Alessandra's deaths. They knew they had to be cautious and methodical if they wanted to expose the truth and achieve justice. That morning, Enzo awoke early, filled with resolve. He understood that to protect Luca and honor the memory of his children, he needed to create a plan to dismantle the organization without alerting them. Sitting in his study, staring at the photographs of Domenico and Alessandra on his desk, he felt a surge of pain and determination. He would avenge his family, no matter the cost. Salvatore arrived shortly after, bringing fresh information. He had spent the previous nights investigating the organization's most influential members and mapping out their connections. Now, with a list of names in hand, they were ready to take action. Enzo, Luca, we have an opportunity, Salvatore said, opening the folder containing the documents. I discovered that one of the leaders of the organization, Riccardo Gallucci, is scheduled to attend a secret meeting in 3 days at a remote location on the outskirts of the city. This could be our opportunity to gather solid evidence. Luca, who had been listening intently, stepped closer to the table. His eyes shone with determination, mingled with barely contained pain. Concrete evidence? Luca asked, his voice laced with disdain. I don't just want evidence, I want them to pay for what they did to my parents. Enzo felt the same anger rise within him as he looked at his grandson. He understood Luca's thirst for justice, but knew they had to proceed with caution. I understand your anger, Luca, Enzo said, striving for calm. But we need to be careful. If we rush in, they could slip away. We need solid proof to present to the authorities to ensure they face consequences. Salvatore nodded, echoing Enzo's sentiment. A careful approach is essential. We can't just storm the place. Security will be tight, and a wrong move could put our lives in jeopardy. Our goal is to infiltrate the meeting, capture recordings or documents that implicate Gallucci and his organization, and get out without being detected. Luca clenched his fists, recognizing the truth in their words. He couldn't let his anger cloud his judgment. He needed to strategize, even though every instinct urged him to confront the men who had shattered his family. What's the plan? Luca asked, struggling to keep his rage in check. Salvatore leaned over the table, pointing to a map of the property where the meeting would take place. The main entrance is heavily guarded, but I found a weak point in the back. We can sneak in through the garden, where security is lighter. With the right disguise, we can pose as event staff, perhaps catering or maintenance. Once inside, I'll set up listening devices and hidden cameras to capture the conversations. Our aim is to catch Gallucci admitting to his criminal activities. As the plan unfolded, Enzo's mind raced with thoughts on executing every detail flawlessly. He knew they had to get this right. Any mistake could be fatal. I'm going with you, Luca declared suddenly, surprising both Enzo and Salvatore. Luca, Enzo started, but Luca cut him off. No, Grandpa, this isn't something I can walk away from. This fight is mine too. They killed my parents and left me alone. I need to be part of this. Enzo studied his grandson, seeing not the fragile boy he had found weeks ago, but a determined young man ready to confront his demons. He realized he couldn't shield Luca from everything anymore. The boy needed this chance for revenge as much as he did. Fine, Enzo finally said, nodding. But you'll follow Salvatore's lead. We need to be discreet. This isn't about blind vengeance. It's about ensuring they pay for their crimes, definitively. Luca agreed, though anger still flickered in his eyes. He understood the need to control his impulses for the plan to succeed. In the days leading up to the meeting, Enzo, Luca, and Salvatore prepared meticulously. They studied the property's layout, practiced their disguises, and discussed every detail of the infiltration. Salvatore supplied listening devices and cameras to be discreetly hidden during the event, while Luca was trained on how to behave within the property to avoid suspicion. At last, the night of the meeting arrived. Enzo, Luca, and Salvatore, disguised as catering staff, approached the back entrance of the property, where security was less stringent. Enzo's heart raced. This was their moment of truth. All right, we're in, Salvatore whispered as they slipped through the secondary entrance and merged with the other staff. Luca, his heart pounding, followed closely behind. The property's opulent atmosphere sharply contrasted with the tension in the air. They were assigned to serve drinks and move discreetly among the guests, who spoke in hushed tones about business that, to the untrained eye, seemed ordinary, but Enzo knew better. As they navigated the crowd, Salvatore quietly set up listening devices and hidden cameras at strategic locations. Gallucci stood at the center of the room, flanked by his trusted men, seemingly unaware that he was about to be ensnared in his own trap. Luca watched from a distance, adrenaline coursing through him. They were on the brink of uncovering the proof they needed. Suddenly, one of the cameras picked up Gallucci speaking with another man in a secluded corner of the room. This project needs to be completed soon, Gallucci murmured, his voice clearly captured. We need to maintain control of everything. Domenico was becoming a liability, but we dealt with it. He and his wife, it's about time. Now, no one can stop us. Enzo, monitoring the audio through an earpiece, felt his body freeze. There it was, the confession they needed. Gallucci had just admitted his involvement in the deaths of Domenico and Alessandra. But before he could fully absorb their victory, a security guard locked eyes with Luca, as if he recognized him. Luca's heart raced. "Enzo, we've been spotted," Salvatore whispered, noticing the guard's gaze. "We need to leave now." The plan was in jeopardy, and they had to escape before being fully exposed. "Let's go," Enzo urged Luca, leading them toward the back exit. But just as they were about to escape, a shout rang out through the hall. "Get them," the guard yelled, pointing directly at Luca. The chase began. The sound of footsteps echoed through the lavish corridors of the property. The guard's shout had turned the previously serene meeting into chaos. Enzo, Luca, and Salvatore knew they had no time to waste. They had to get out before they were captured, or worse, silenced for good. "This way," Salvatore whispered, gesturing toward a side door leading to the back of the building. Luca, his heart racing, followed his grandfather and Salvatore as they darted through narrow corridors, striving to remain calm. The noise of approaching voices grew louder, and the guards were closing in. Enzo, who had maintained his composure until now, felt his mind racing. He understood that this crucial moment would determine their future. They had Gallucci's confession, the proof that Domenico and Alessandra had been murdered. But what good would it do if they couldn't escape alive? In that moment, Salvatore pushed open the back door, shoving Luca and Enzo into the dark garden. "We need to blend into the bushes until we find the back gate." The night air was frigid, and the wind howled through the tall trees, creating an eerie atmosphere. As they ran, their feet crunched on the gravel path, but the adrenaline driving them forward made them ignore the sound. Salvatore led the way, his eyes frantically searching for a safe exit. "We need to reach the car," Enzo said, struggling to catch his breath. "Salvatore, do you have the recording? We need it intact." "It's all here," Salvatore replied, tapping the small recording device hidden under his coat. "But it won't matter if they catch us first." Luca kept glancing over his shoulder, feeling the tension tighten in his chest. He could see the shadows of the guards getting closer. The fear of being caught was almost paralyzing, but he knew he couldn't fail. He had to get justice for his parents, no matter the cost. Suddenly, one of the guards stepped out from a garden path, raising a gun and pointing it directly at Enzo. "Don't take another step," the man shouted, his voice filled with authority. Luca froze, his eyes wide with terror. Time seemed to slow as the guard moved closer. Enzo instinctively stepped forward, placing himself between his grandson and the armed man. His heart raced, but he knew he couldn't show fear, not now. "We don't have to do this," Enzo said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We can leave without causing any trouble. We don't want to fight." The guard, however, wasn't interested in negotiating. His eyes glinted with determination. "You don't have a choice. You're coming back inside, and we'll settle this there," he said, gesturing with the gun. Salvatore, who had been silent until now, realized there was no time for more words. In a swift motion, he moved to the side, grabbing a fallen branch from the ground and hurling it at the guard. The blow struck the man's hand, causing him to drop the gun for a brief moment. "Run!" Salvatore yelled, seizing the distraction. Luca and Enzo sprinted toward the back gate. The sound of footsteps and shouts behind them grew louder, but the adrenaline pushed them forward. Finally, they reached the gate. Salvatore, already out of breath, pushed open the heavy iron structure, which creaked as it swung open, revealing the dark, empty road outside. "The car isn't far. Get in," Salvatore ordered as he rushed to the driver's seat. As soon as everyone was inside, he slammed his foot on the gas, and the vehicle sped down the deserted road. The screech of the tires echoed as the mansion shrank in the distance. In the back seat, Luca struggled to catch his breath, his thoughts still chaotic. He glanced at Enzo, who was staring out at the horizon, as if still trying to process everything that had happened. "We did it!" Luca exclaimed, his voice low but filled with relief. "We have Gallucci's confession. Now they'll pay." Enzo nodded slowly, but worry lingered in his expression. "We have the confession, yes, but this is just the beginning, Luca. The organization is still out there, and now they know we're onto them. Things are going to get more dangerous." Salvatore, focused on the road, glanced at them through the rearview mirror. "Enzo's right. We have critical evidence, but Gallucci and his men won't rest until they silence us. We need to act fast and take this to the authorities before they make their next move." Luca, despite his exhaustion, nodded. He knew the battle was only beginning, but for the first time in a long while, he felt hope. His parents wouldn't be forgotten, and justice would finally be served. When they arrived at Salvatore's safe house, a small warehouse on the outskirts of the city, they immediately began reviewing the recording they had obtained. Gallucci's voice confessing to the murders of Domenico and Alessandra was crystal clear. "This is enough," Salvatore said after listening to the recording. "We have the proof. Now we need to hand it over to someone we can trust." "But who can we trust?" Enzo asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Gallucci has influence in every sector. We must ensure the right person receives this information." Salvatore paused for a moment, thinking, "I know a prosecutor who can help. He's not on Gallucci's payroll, and he's determined to take down organizations like his. But we'll need to be discreet when we hand over this recording." Luca, who had been quiet until now, spoke with determination. "Let's do it. No matter how dangerous it is, we're so close. We can't stop now." Enzo looked at his grandson, admiring his resolve. He knew Luca was right. They had come too far to turn back. The risk was high, but the reward, justice for Domenico and Alessandra, was worth it. The next morning, the atmosphere was charged with tension as Enzo, Luca, and Salvatore prepared for their next move. They understood that delivering the evidence to the prosecutor wouldn't be straightforward, particularly with Gallucci's organization on high alert after the previous night's escape. The cramped warehouse felt like a cage, its walls seemingly eavesdropping on the pivotal decision they were about to make. Enzo turned to Luca, who, despite his youth, exhibited remarkable resolve. "Are you ready for what comes next?" Enzo asked, acutely aware that the upcoming hours would be the most perilous of their lives. "We don't have a choice, Grandpa," Luca replied firmly. "If we don't do this, they'll get away with it, and all my parents endured will be for nothing." Salvatore, busy checking equipment and adjusting the disguises for the handoff, turned to them. "We need to be quick and discreet. The prosecutor is reliable, but Gallucci has eyes everywhere. If he catches wind of anything suspicious, we could be dead before we reach the courtroom." Enzo nodded, his mind racing with apprehension. They were about to step into a perilous situation. Even though they had the evidence, the battle was far from over. "All right, let's go," Salvatore said, tossing a bag containing security devices over his shoulder. "The prosecutor will meet us in an underground parking lot. We'll be safe there, but we need to move quickly." The drive was fraught with tension, everyone in the car hyper-aware of every movement on the road. Luca, seated in the back, watched the streets of Milan blur by outside. The silence in the vehicle was heavy, each of them lost in their own thoughts, fully aware of the stakes. Upon arriving at the underground parking lot, Salvatore led them to a darker, more secluded corner. The area was deserted except for a single black car parked in the distance. Salvatore recognized it as the prosecutor's vehicle. "There he is," Salvatore said, pointing. "Let's hurry." They exited the car and approached the prosecutor, a middle-aged man with a serious demeanor. He stepped out of his vehicle and greeted them. "Salvatore Enzo," he said, nodding at Luca. "Do you have the evidence?" "It's right here," Salvatore answered, retrieving the recording device from his pocket and handing it to the prosecutor. This proves that Gallucci was involved in the murders of Domenico and Alessandra. He confessed everything during our meeting. The prosecutor scrutinized the device, his expression inscrutable. "You've done an excellent job," he said, tucking the recording into the inner pocket of his jacket. "Now we need to take this to court and build our case." Before they could discuss further, the sharp screech of tires shattered the moment. Suddenly, several cars surrounded them, and armed men leaped from the vehicles. Within seconds, Salvatore, Enzo, and Luca realized they had walked into a trap. "Run!" Salvatore shouted, yanking Enzo and Luca toward their car, but it was too late. Gallucci's men were closing in, weapons drawn. The prosecutor, visibly shaken, took a step back. "Clearly, this wasn't supposed to happen," he exclaimed. Before he could react, one of the armed men seized him, dragging him away. Luca scanned the area, his heart racing. They were cornered, with no escape in sight. "You thought you could defeat me," a familiar voice echoed across the parking lot. Riccardo Gallucci emerged from one of the cars, a smug smile plastered across his face. "You were clever, I'll give you that, but not clever enough. I always anticipated you'd try something." Seeing Gallucci ignited a torrent of rage within Enzo. The man was responsible for the deaths of his son and daughter-in-law, and Enzo could barely contain his fury. "You will pay for everything you've done, Gallucci," he spat, his voice dripping with hatred. "We have the proof. You can't escape the truth." Gallucci laughed, approaching Enzo. "Proof? What proof?" he mocked, snatching the recording device from the prosecutor's pocket and smashing it on the ground. "Now you have nothing, and guess what? No one will believe you." Luca, who had been silent until now, stepped forward, his anger erupting. "You killed my parents," he yelled, tears brimming in his eyes. "You destroyed our family." Gallucci regarded Luca with contempt. "Your parents were obstacles, and obstacles must be removed. Now the same fate awaits you and your dear grandfather." Despair engulfed Enzo and Salvatore. Surrounded by Gallucci's men, without evidence and with no means of escape, they felt hopeless. Just as all seemed lost, the distant wail of sirens pierced the air. The police were on their way. Enzo felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. "Do you hear that, Gallucci?" he declared, a newfound confidence in his voice. "Your game is over." Gallucci's expression shifted as he realized his time was running out. With a quick motion, he signaled to his men. "Let's go," he shouted as his thugs began to retreat to their cars. Before leaving, Gallucci turned to Enzo, his eyes filled with malice. "This isn't over, Enzo. I will finish what I started." With that, Gallucci climbed into his car and vanished into the shadows with his men. The sirens grew louder, and soon the police arrived at the scene. The shaken prosecutor was taken for questioning, while Enzo, Luca, and Salvatore were surrounded by officers. "Are you all okay?" one of the officers inquired, surveying the chaos around them. Enzo inhaled deeply, grappling with the events that had just unfolded. "We're alive," he replied, but his focus remained on Gallucci. He knew this would not be the last time they confronted the man who had shattered their family. With the evidence destroyed and Gallucci still at large, Enzo and Luca understood that their fight was far from over. Now, with the police involved and the spotlight on them, they needed a fresh plan, one that would ensure Gallucci had nowhere left to run. As they were led away by the police to provide their statements, Enzo caught Luca's eye, seeing the resolve etched in his grandson's expression. "This isn't over, Luca," he affirmed, "but we will prevail. We'll bring down Gallucci, no matter the cost." That night, in Salvatore's hideout, the trio gathered around a table, the weight of their next steps heavy in the air. Enzo, usually composed, now seemed weighed down by the gravity of the situation. "Gallucci knows we're on his trail," Enzo began, addressing Luca and Salvatore. "He's likely to escalate his efforts to eliminate us. If we don't act swiftly, he may try to take us out before we can gather new evidence. We need a new strategy. Salvatore began analyzing maps and documents spread across the table. We can't infiltrate this time. Gallucci's on high alert. He'll anticipate our every move. Luca, who had remained silent, looked at both men with newfound determination. He's going to pay for what he did, Luca asserted, his voice steady. And if we can't gather new evidence the traditional way, then we'll force him to confess publicly, Luca declared, standing up from his chair, his mind racing with possibilities. Enzo frowned, confused. What do you mean, Luca? Gallucci is arrogant. He craves control and loves to brag about his victories. Luca explained, his voice growing stronger as the idea solidified. If we confront him in a crowded place and provoke an emotional reaction, he might slip up and confess in front of witnesses. That's a risky move, Enzo replied, contemplating Gallucci's volatility. If this goes sideways, we could end up dead. I know it's risky, but it's our best shot, Luca insisted. He already sees us as a threat. If we push him at the right moment, in a place where he can't easily escape, we can catch him. Salvatore crossed his arms, considering their options. Luca has a point. Gallucci's ego and need for control could work to our advantage, but we need to ensure the location is secure, with police on standby in case things escalate. Enzo sighed, recognizing that Luca's plan, though fraught with danger, was their only viable option. They lacked physical evidence, had few allies, and Gallucci held the upper hand in many ways. Their only assets were their determination and courage to bring him down. Fine, Enzo finally agreed. We'll do it your way, Luca, but we need a solid plan. We must choose the right time and place. In the following days, they meticulously laid the groundwork. They selected a large public square in the center of Milan, a bustling area where Gallucci wouldn't be able to slip away unnoticed. They were aware he would be attending a meeting with influential city members, providing the perfect opportunity for confrontation. Salvatore reached out to the prosecutor who, despite being rattled by the previous ambush, assured them that the police would be ready, watching from a distance, and prepared to act if Gallucci displayed any suspicious behavior. When the day arrived, the square thrummed with life, filled with people going about their daily routines, unaware they were about to witness the culmination of a long-standing battle between Enzo Castellani and Riccardo Gallucci. Luca, Enzo, and Salvatore were strategically positioned, waiting for the right moment. At last, Gallucci appeared, flanked by his men. He exuded confidence, seemingly unaware of the trap being set for him. Luca seized the moment, approaching Gallucci with a pounding heart but a resolute posture. When he was just a few meters away, he shouted, his voice resonating through the square. Gallucci! Luca called, loud enough to grab the attention of passers-by. Your game is over. You're going to pay for what you did to my parents. Gallucci stopped, surprise morphing into disdain as he looked at Luca, as if he were an insolent child. Ah, it's you again, he said with a cynical smirk. I thought you learned not to meddle with people like me. Looks like I'll have to teach you that lesson again. Luca held his ground, glaring at Gallucci with fierce intensity. You killed my parents. You destroyed our family. And now you think you can run away? This time, everyone here will know the truth. Gallucci took a few steps forward, his men shifting closer behind him, but he raised a hand, signaling them to hold back. Your parents were fools who got involved in things they couldn't comprehend, Gallucci sneered, his voice dripping with menace. They paid the price, and so will you. Fueled by rage, Luca stood firm. So you admit it? You killed Domenico and Alessandra Castellani? As the crowd began to gather, curious onlookers stopped to watch the confrontation. Gallucci, still arrogant and oblivious to the danger, continued, Yes, I killed them, he said with a cruel smile. They were a problem, and I dealt with it. Keep pushing, and you'll meet the same fate. This was the moment Enzo and Salvatore had anticipated. the second Gallucci publicly confessed. Salvatore discreetly signaled to the police, who had been waiting nearby. In moments, police cars surrounded the square, officers emerging with their weapons drawn. "Riccardo Gallucci," one officer shouted, "you're under arrest." Gallucci's confidence shattered as he saw the weapons aimed at him and realized the crowd had heard his confession. He attempted to retreat, but it was too late. The officers swiftly closed in and handcuffed him. Luca watched, his initial anger transforming into a sense of justice as Gallucci was led away. "We did it, Grandpa," he said, turning to Enzo, who placed a comforting hand on his grandson's shoulder. "Yes, we did," Enzo replied, his voice a blend of relief and emotion. "Your parents can finally rest in peace." Luca stepped away for a moment. Salvatore wandered into the garden where he had played with his parents. On his face. The full moon illuminated the path, and Gallucci would finally face justice. As if Domenico and Alessandro were the trial of Riccardo Gallucci filled with pride. A sensational media event. "I did this for you," Luca recorded confessions, up at the along with witness testimonies, and I promised to live the life you always effectively dismantled the criminal organization brushed against his face for years, and it felt like Luca, one last embrace from Salvatore watched as this chapter closed. That they were heavy-hearted yet certain that he could finally achieve justice for Domenico and Alessandra. Luca rejoined Enzo and Salvatore, knowing they had done the right thing, laugh, and share stories, mansion, reminiscing about the good times and planning for the future, reeking its vitality. It was a night of healing and renewal. Luca, still young as the evening progressed, Luca understood he had a newfound light sparkling in his eyes. Yet this time, he felt a sense of certainty that his family had been avenged. I'd like to help others who've experienced on the mansion's veranda, beneath the setting sun. Maybe start a foundation and to support victims of injustice, ready to face whatever came next as a family united by the truth. Enzo beamed with pride. "You know, Grandpa, glad to see how I don't think I'll ever forget everything we've been through." "That's a wonderful idea," Luca admitted. His father and mother would be vibrant colors of the sky. So am I. But for the first time together, I feel at peace. Salvatore, Enzo ever practical, raised his glass that reflected years of new adventures, resilience, because life is full of them, and we're just getting started. Always forget. Luca, life at the Castellani mansion would never be the same present. But this time, we can move forward now. We can love that had been marred by the past by living the way they would have wanted us to, with love, courage, all the challenges. The family remained Luca nodded, feeling emotional as he recalled the joyful moments he had shared with Domenico and Alessandra and Salvatore knew that the future, though his journey had been difficult on what he had discovered what mattered most, truth and love, purpose and family. Finally, thanks to his grandfathers and Salvatore's don't forget to turn on the notification bell to catch the next video right away, holding a bottle of wine. Share this with your friends and wearing a mischievous video on the end screen. "Don't you think it's time to celebrate?" he asked, shaking the bottle playfully. "I can't remember the last time we opened a good bottle of wine here. It's time to toast to a new chapter for this family." Luca and Enzo chuckled, the lightness finally filling the air. It was the first time in years they had allowed themselves a moment of joy without the burden of guilt or pain. They stood up and gathered around the table on the veranda, where Salvatore poured the wine. As the sky above them darkened with stars, Salvatore raised his glass. "To courage, to truth, and to the future," he exclaimed. "May this be just the beginning of a new journey." "To family," Enzo added, his eyes shimmering with emotion. Luca, holding his glass, looked at the two men before him, those who had stood by his side through all the trials. He took a deep breath, feeling a wave of relief wash over him as things finally felt right. "And to the memory of my parents," he said, lifting his glass, "may they know I'll never forget them, and that their fight wasn't in vain." The glasses clinked softly, and a comfortable silence enveloped them. They didn't need words to understand the significance of the moment. It marked the end of one journey and the beginning of another. The pain and suffering had left their marks, but love, justice, and hope prevailed. After the toast, Luca stepped away for a moment and wandered into the garden where he had played with his parents. The full moon illuminated the path, and he felt their presence, as if Domenico and Alessandra were smiling down at him, filled with pride. "I did this for you," Luca murmured, gazing up at the starry sky. "And I promised to live the life you always dreamed for me." A gentle breeze brushed against his face, and it felt like one last embrace from his parents, a silent assurance that they were at peace and that he could finally move forward. Returning to the veranda, Luca rejoined Enzo and Salvatore. They continued to talk, laugh, and share stories, reminiscing about the good times and planning for the future. It was a night of healing and renewal. As the evening progressed, Luca rose, a newfound light sparkling in his eyes. "You know, Grandpa, I've been thinking. I'd like to help others who've experienced what we have. Maybe start a foundation to support victims of injustice. I think that's what my parents would have done." Enzo beamed with pride, glad to see how much Luca had grown. "That's a wonderful idea, Luca. Your father and mother would be so proud of you, and so am I. Let's do it together." Salvatore, ever practical, raised his glass once more. "To new adventures, because life is full of them, and we're just getting started." Life at the Castellani mansion would never be the same, but this time the change was welcome. The love that had been marred by the past was now blossoming with renewed strength. Despite all the challenges, the family remained united. That night, as the stars twinkled brightly over the mansion, Enzo, Luca, and Salvatore knew that the future, though uncertain, would be built on what truly mattered: family, truth, and love. Finally, they were free to live. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to catch the next video right away. Share this with your friends and check out the video on the end screen. You won't be disappointed.